Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler. I have just set out a Thanksgiving meal and have invited my sister, Jessie Ward, to join me at the table to discuss number 42 on the 50 best rom-coms list, She's Gotta Have It. How are you doing, Jessie?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm glad this is an audio podcast because we're recording this early on Saturday morning and we both definitely look like we just got out of bed.
Speak for yourself.
So what do you think is more awkward? This Thanksgiving dinner scene that Nola hosts with her three boyfriends or a Thanksgiving meal during COVID times?
The Thanksgiving meal in the movie, for sure. Absolutely. Because that would be worse than just introducing your partner to your family at Thanksgiving. Way worse.
Way worse. Well, let's go visit Brooklyn in 1986 and to discuss Spike Lee's feature film debut, She's Gotta Have It.
Nola was something special. She had this amazing effect on men.
Please, baby, please, baby, please, baby, 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 please.
Good night.
Good night. Wait a minute. Is Jamie there?
I was the best thing that ever happened to Nola, darling. Ask her, she'll tell you that herself. Why, she worshipped me.
I've never seen anybody who liked to look at themselves more than you do. Don't you ever get tired?
Never happened, baby.
Stop, Nola, stop! Stop! Nola knew what she wanted. And she's gotta have it.
She's Gotta Have It is a 1986 American black and white comedy drama film produced, edited, and directed by Spike Lee. Filmed on a small budget and Lee's first feature-length film to be released, it earned positive reviews and launched Lee's career. The film stars Tracy Camilla Johns, Tommy Redmond Hicks, John Canada Terrell, and Lee himself in a supporting role. The plot concerns a young woman, Nola, who is seeing three men, and the feelings this arrangement provokes. In 2017, Lee adapted the film into a Netflix series, and in 2019, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. Before we get into this conversation, we will be talking about spoilers, but also want to caution our listeners because we will be talking about rape and sexual assault, which does occur in this film. Shockingly so. Before we get into that heavy subject matter, I do have to ask you, Jessie, about your background with this story. So you told me that you had seen the television series on Netflix, but not the film, correct?
Correct. Yeah. The show is great.
Yeah. So I looked at it was two seasons.
Yes.
What drove you to to watch that show? Have you been a fan of Spike Lee and his stuff before?
Honestly, I have not seen much Spike Lee at all. Like, I really have to seek it out. It's not something that just shows up. Like the algorithm brought the show to me. Like, so it just showed up in my life. Spike Lee is someone who's like, okay, I want to see specific films, and then finding out about him. Yeah, I was just drawn to the show. Like, I'm just gonna try this out. Let's see. I've heard Spike Lee is great, and it's about an artist, and I mean, it follows the movie pretty well, but the way they depict her life as an artist was very real to me. Like, it's the first very real and accurate depiction I've seen on screen of that, and just incredibly intriguing. So yeah, usually I hate Netflix algorithms, but this time it was for the win.
Well, it's funny. People who have come onto this podcast, they've picked the movie, and so I mean, you can read into that like it is. But it's funny how some of the films I feel like have correlated with the guests more so than I thought it would. So watching this, I was like, oh my gosh, this movie is about an artist, and so yeah, I definitely made that. I definitely made that connection and was wondering about the appeal of her character to you in that sense.
Yeah. Which in the movie, it's not emphasized that much. The emphasis is definitely on her relationships more than anything else, but which obviously like goes into her her artwork, but yeah, it's more like a side note, I think, in
Yeah.
this movie.
Yeah, I thought maybe the only thing that might not have been super realistic was maybe the size of her apartment.
Yeah, I wonder what 1980s Brooklyn was like, though.
True.
Yeah, I have no context for what that could be like, and I think that in other movies about New York, it's always about New York City or Manhattan. We don't see that much Brooklyn until later, like definitely maybe mid to late 2010s is when Brooklyn starts to pop up more. So
Right.
maybe Brooklyn at the time did have luxurious, cheap apartments. We can only dream.
Well, yeah, I've always been a really big fan of Spike Lee's work. I definitely haven't seen all of his movies,
Mhm.
but Do the Right Thing is I actually consider probably one of my favorite films. It's completely powerful, and even though even maybe some of the movies that haven't worked in his canon, I think there's always something to gain from them. He's always trying something. And I mean, you can see it early on in this movie. I surprised that I just did not know anything about this movie, and
Mhm.
quickly enough so even when I started it, I said to myself, "Oh, this must have been his first film," because it's definitely you can tell it's an independent film.
Right.
There's not in a bad way. There's some rough edges to it, but man, you see I mean, it's easy to say now, oh, look how successful he is, but I can totally
Right.
see when you see this film going like, okay, yeah, this is going to be a voice in film for a long time. And I can't help but think of Kevin Smith's Clerks because of the use of the black and white cinematography. And
Mhm.
even though that movie is completely different than this one, you could tell that Kevin Smith, his independent filmmaking style was very much influenced from this. And then also
Mhm.
I can see how maybe this movie was kind of a Spike Lee maybe kind of taking what Woody Allen did with Manhattan
Mhm.
and like saying, okay, no, this is like my New York. This is like my Brooklyn. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it was reminiscent of Manhattan, and I figured that Woody Allen's was before this movie, She's Gotta Have It, but,
It was, yeah.
yeah, this feels more realistic about a lived experience, even if you were living in Manhattan. Um, it felt like the character of the city in Manhattan is more like nostalgia and romantic ideals about it, whereas She's Gotta Have It feels like, no, this is my home. Um, but yeah, that film did come to mind, which caveat here, not a Woody Allen fan for a lot of his personal choices. Just want to bring that up that I'm not
No, no,
supporting
no.
him as a filmmaker or a person. Just
Well, no,
side note.
this, yeah, a completely good sidebar. And I was going to say that as well. Even if you read the description of Manhattan and the plot, it's problematic in itself. But also, I agree with you. I won't go too much on a tangent, but I always really loved his films. I had always considered Annie Hall one of my favorite films. And I had always heard about the controversy surrounding him, but
Mhm.
not digging too much into it. And I watched the miniseries Mia versus Woody, I think it's called,
Mhm.
or anyway, but it's all about the case. And oh my gosh, I mean, yeah, I'm with you. I just can't.
Yeah,
I can't. There's always that debate of artists versus their art, but
right.
I so much of what he stands for in Manhattan, I think, is a great example. Is like, yeah,
Mhm.
did we not see this? Like, he was just he was out there.
Mhm.
He was out there showcasing his values,
Right,
and then people seem to be shocked that he was basically a sexual predator. And it's like,
right.
and
Yeah.
then he was celebrated for it. So yeah, of course he, thought he was super powerful and could get his way and stuff like that. So
Right. Right.
anyway, that's my side tangent.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Audience knows we don't support predators. Check.
Check. I want to. I want to make sure if people want to check it out, I want to get the exact name of the doc. Alan V. Vero is the HBO docuseries. So I think people really should check that out. It's pretty powerful. Anyway, we digress. But so yeah, I love his editing style. I love the use of kind of still photography that he uses. It has that independent style. I really could tell a lot. You could tell as an independent film. I thought in the audio is not as crisp as he sometimes, but I don't think it detracted from the film. But that was the one thing where you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is. You could tell it was filmed on a shoestring budget. But I read the movie. The movie was shot in 12 days,
Wow.
which is they said it said because. Yeah, it said because the budget was so tight, there were no retakes, which I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
About
So
the photography, and the look of the film, it reminded me a lot of some movies I've seen that maybe were directed in the 40s and 50s, more like capital F film. And because I haven't had a ton of coffee, I'm not going to be able to remember the directors' names or the years, but there's this really great art film that's French called Un Jeté, and it's all made of still black and white photographs, except that, and it's 20 minutes long, so it works, but there is one moment of like 30 or 40 seconds of actual movement of moving film. It's really great and it tells a story that way, but that definitely came to mind with She's Gotta Have It, because there's so many still photographs that convey the life of the city when they're not actually in the city that much, and their context. So yeah, I was wondering, I would assume he would have seen a lot more like film that made the canon and the art form itself. And I would doubt that he had seen a French film then, because videos weren't available. I don't know if the Criterion collection even existed at that point, but yeah, it was really cool, the connections there.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, it's very much as far as a filmmaker starting out, I can totally see how it's a way to build this world without having to spend the money on it. So he probably couldn't afford the locations, to film in certain places. And so it's a great way of, like you said, tying that, to these characters in the world they live in. And he still has done that a lot in his movies. And sometimes they're jarring of like, why are we looking at these photographs of like different people and stuff? But I think so much of somebody's story, it's not so much the things that happen, but it's the world that surrounds you,
Absolutely. When I make art, that's entirely what I'm thinking about, is the context that makes a person. So maybe that extra resonated with me in the movie too, is like your environment and where you live. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you think this movie is a romantic comedy?
It's definitely funny. I do. It's romance in a way that we never see on screen, right? It's very bold. It's very straightforward. But yeah, it's more realistic in a lot of ways than what we're used to seeing on screen. And I would imagine, especially for the time that he made this in. Yeah. It's
I
100%
was
about romantic feelings, and it's really funny. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked, not in the sense of like, oh, I do declare this is, but almost like almost double checking the when this movie was made, just because
Right.
I was like, oh my gosh, this was in 1986. Because honestly, this is probably something you would more so see now in a
Right.
Netflix series or that type of thing. But yeah, I was really surprised by how progressive the film was, and especially
Right.
this kind of fluid mindset of relationships, not just her relationships with these three men, but also, I mean, they kind of hint at it a little bit, but even with her friend who's a lesbian, but her even contemplating that a little bit too.
Right.
I was really, it was one of those movies I wish I was present at the time just to be surrounded by the conversation going on about
Yeah.
this film.
Yeah. And I think it was really unique in that it's showing um, just Black people living without the context of oppression that we also see in a lot of films. And even at the time, like stereotypes or whatever, it's just like Black joy and Black pain that's not related to all of the oppression that they face. Even in the photographs, it's it's not about that at all. So I think that in itself is also unique, and she doesn't fall into an angry woman trope.
Mhm.
And I think that in itself is really unique and not something you see a lot of even now. I mean, it's getting, we see that more and more of more accurate and nuanced views of Black people. But yeah. And again, like with her lesbian friend, I mean, I think that was still very taboo for a lot of people. I mean, you and I, we grew up in East Texas, so even more taboo than being in Brooklyn, perhaps. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the I wonder if the expectations of her partners, of Jamie, Mars, and Greer, if that unease and anger they feel about not having her for themselves is intensified by being in the 1980s versus when the TV show is made, it's set in present day. So those ideas are more prevalent and normal.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really progressive. I love it.
Yeah, I loved these three characters because I mean, although there's all sorts of different types of people, I do think it's a good reflection of like probably how someone, male or female, uh, kind of decides to test the water, so to speak. I just liked how these three characters are, one's like the poet, so the kind of sensitive guy, and then
Yeah,
one's the goofball, like
right.
and that's Mars, who's just gonna make you laugh. So even though he may not be serious about life, you like have a really good time with him. And then you just have I just dubbed him the stud, Greer, who's just he's completely conceited, but he can provide you the security, that you're probably looking for. He's all
Yeah,
about himself and fit, but he has maybe the
he's a
money,
jerk.
Oh, it's such a jerk. Yeah.
He's
So
terrible.
yeah.
Also, like with him, it felt like I kept being like, why is he part of her life? Like, she seems like she knows herself well enough, and that why would she include him? Because he's saying all these terrible things to her all the time. But it feels more like Spike Lee needed him to be in the movie to show a character like him more so than the realistic idea of her having a substantial relationship with this guy.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say, even though there's these three characters and three relationships going on, there does seem to be kind of a tier system with them. And
Yeah.
so I would say Greer's definitely at the bottom of that tier,
Yeah, even at their Thanksgiving meal, Mars is like, "You're not down. You don't even get to be a part of this coin toss."
So did the Mars character did you recognize that character at all from the old Nike commercials?
Uh, no, no,
Uh, okay,
not
yes.
no.
So he reprised the role of Mars Blackman in Nike ads for with Air Jordan, Michael
Oh,
Jordan were in them. So it's kind of fun. Even there's that one scene. I think he's on the phone, but you see the Michael Jordan poster
yeah.
behind him. But it was a famous line. Is it the shoes?
Is it the short socks?
No, Mars.
Money's gotta be the shoes. Shoes. You sure it's not the shoes?
I'm sure, Mars.
What about the shoes?
No, Mars.
Money's gotta be the shoes.
You didn't see those commercials?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll have to send you some links of those. But yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Not just as a filmmaker, but his character as well became kind of a pop culture fixture. You know, he definitely stands out in this movie. Sometimes there's some filmmakers that put themselves in their films and you kind of roll your eyes, but I thought he fit really, really well in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's so necessary for relieving, like he's so much of the comedy. Like the other comedy in it is way more subtle. Whereas of course Mars is very bombastic. But he's so necessary to make the film enjoyable, like to be that comedic relief.
We talked about the Thanksgiving scene a little bit, but I honestly, when that scene started, it took me a little while. I was trying mentally to figure out, is this like a dream sequence or is this actually happening? And
Yeah.
did you feel that at all, or were you in the moment of like, this is actually happening?
Well, that scene also plays out in the show, so that didn't occur to me. But yeah, now that you say that, I could completely see that happening because it is so bizarre. It's just, yeah, you wouldn't expect that at all, especially for such an important holiday. Yeah, it does seem very surreal.
Before we enjoy this meal, I'd like to know whose brilliant idea this was.
Who invited you?
And who invited you?
I invited all you fools. You were gonna meet sooner or later, so why let it be an accident?
Maybe she's right. Let's just enjoy today.
I like how all the guys are still there, regardless.
Yeah.
I feel,
Yeah.
you know, so they all like her so much that they are still willing to go to the table, you know, for her.
Right. But also feels like they didn't leave because they have something to prove, which definitely plays out after they eat. But maybe if they showed up, did she even tell them that's what it was going to be? Because I feel like if she did, they wouldn't have come.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the idea of it, they'd be like, no way, that's disrespectful to me. And how could you? But they have something to prove, so they stay. Right. That's the only reason this scene makes any sense, that these people wouldn't leave on seeing the other person, is they got to prove themselves to Nola that they're the best one.
Yeah. And I mean, Nola as a character, I just loved her character. She's probably one of the strongest female characters I've seen portrayed in film before. I know that's kind of a strong statement, but I really liked her as a character, but also you really have to buy into that these very three different types of people would be into her. And
Right.
I like that you totally see why they would be falling for her.
Right. I would agree with your statement. No one makes an apology in this movie, which is interesting. But which with her, though, the fact that she never actually apologizes for who she is or what she does also makes her one of the strongest female leads, I think. She does have some insecurities that come up, but it's more like she tackles them in a more objective way. Like, well, is this true or is this not true? Whereas maybe if if this character was taken by someone else, they'd they wouldn't be as strong in themselves. And Nolan just really knows who she is. I love that.
We have to touch on the scene where Jamie comes to her apartment and essentially, rapes her and
Right.
sexually assaults her. I was pretty. I mean, as such a scene would provoke, I was pretty shocked by it, but almost more so like her reaction, like right after. And
Mm.
as far as like going back to him, and then
Right.
it had been a long time before such like the rape scene itself, just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening.
Right.
Even with Jamie, I know I like pro wrestling, and so there's the term there's the term I don't know if you've ever heard of it, like a heel turn. Have you ever heard of
Mm-mm.
that before? So it's
No.
basically like, so you have your baby faces, they're the good guys, and then the heels that are the bad guys. And pro wrestling, there's always some kind of turn. Like all of a sudden, this good guy's a bad guy. And to
Right.
me, I was like, in this movie, I'm not making light of what he does, but I was like, this is the ultimate heel turn, because I do think, like, I mean, I might be wrong, but you're also kind of led to believe that kind of Jamie's the one that she's supposed to be with through this movie.
Right.
He's kind of that tier system, that number one, so you're kind of like, he seems like the nice guy and the emotional guy, sensitive guy. And when that happens, it's just like, it's so like,
It's
what else?
really jarring. And
Jarring's a great word. Yeah.
it's really jarring and unexpected. And even he later is like, I've never done anything like that before. There are just so many things to say about his character, what led up to that, what he did, and how he himself responds about it. He also never apologizes. He still thinks, even though he did that, he's in the right. Right. I don't think he sees that. I'm sure he, like, because he's so corny and poetic, I'm sure has a lot of inward introspection, but also like, I don't think he sees that necessarily as a major fault of like what we would consider like, you did something horrendous. And I don't think he sees it as horrendous as he should, right? Which kind of leads into what she says, and what the whole movie has been leading us to, is that it was about control for him. And I kind of wonder, like, he does seem like he's the top dog in her trio for sure. Like, she's the one that, like, she actually loves him and he actually really loves her. But it feels, no, I can't speak to Survivor's experience at all, but it feels more real, more nuanced about domestic violence, and how a lot of people might think like, well, why did she stay? Why did she put up with that? Like, if he did that, she should have left. And how messy and complicated that can be in a relationship, whether it's in a marriage or in a a trio of men. And I love also that it was surprising to himself, just like it's surprising to the audience, that kind of violence and hate is when we can't get what we want. We're all capable of that, right? Like, none of us would have thought Jamie was capable of that, and Nolan especially didn't. And I don't even think Jamie thought he was capable of that, but that is all within us, like, to have that heel turn in a way. It was an unexpected choice, but I think a really interesting and important choice that Spike Lee put in there. The film is so nuanced about control that's like, just in case you didn't get this, that's about control. Let's just like use the absolute biggest epitome of control so you really get it. That's
Yeah.
about control. And then even then Nola doesn't see that. And when she goes back to him initially.
Yeah, and I think that I definitely see what Spike Lee is going for. I think the way that it's shot and framed almost gets a little and sounds weird to put these two terms together, but kind of kitschy for a rape scene. This is kind of where it seems like he is kind of trying. I think you could frame of like what happened and had the same themes without filming it the way that he did. And I actually want to say in a 2014 interview with the Huffington Post, he actually said that Spike Lee said that he regretted including the scene in which Jamie rapes Nola. He explained, quote, "If I was able to have any do-overs, that would be it. It was just totally stupid. I was immature. It made light of rape, and that's the one thing I would take back. I was immature, and I hate that I did not view rape as the vile act that it is." And so I think not that maybe he necessarily, I mean, I don't think he's saying he thinks rape is okay. I think as a young filmmaker, he was saying, oh, this is a great way to really showcase the themes that I'm going for. And I think, upon reflection, he's like, I probably would have handled that a way different way, you know? Yeah. And I think probably the Netflix series, even though I haven't seen it, and I looked and I saw that it had good reviews. I think a lot of people, because this was the film that launched his career, it was almost kind of a way to tell the story again without maybe including such a scene like that. And
I can see that. Yeah. There's so many other ways to show vulnerability and manipulation. Yeah, I can see that. There is one other thing I wanted to say about it. Even when she goes back to him, she herself calls it near rape, right? Which I think goes into her character of like denial about her relationship with him. But also like what you just said about his interview with the Huffington Post, like I didn't know anything about that. I wonder if, as being young and immature and also not having all the education and information that we're afforded today about assault, if in his mind he was like, well, he didn't really rape her because she wanted to have sex with him in the beginning. I'm not gonna put that on him, but I think it's possible, especially like it's really weird that she herself is like, well, that was near rape, so maybe that's why she can still be with him, or maybe that's just how she's trying to frame him as, like, I don't know, in more romantic terms than he really deserves.
Yeah, I like what you said about the control aspect and the themes of this, because it just, as you were talking, it really hit me. I know I mentioned it earlier, but in his movie, Do the Right Thing, that's all, that whole movie is just about the things that men are capable of, that they think they're not capable of such things. So have you seen that movie? Have you seen that movie before?
I have not.
Oh my. Oh, well.
Look, I'm just at a place in my life where I want to see all of these remarkable films, and I am so exhausted by 8:30 after I put the kids to bed. It's not going to happen unless I am doing a podcast with my brother. But maybe we should do a podcast about the movies that you're like, you have to see this.
Yeah, well, it's just it really, I mean, you can tell, I mean, it was made a couple of years after this one, so I mean, the jump of what he's able to do with a budget is pretty incredible, because he has a lot more characters and stuff like that. But there, I won't ruin anything, but basically there's some characters in there that end up doing something that, you know, that is shocking, but also you see the build up to it. And so I think he's always he's always played with those themes. But all this to lead to, like, when she, you know, she goes back to Jamie for a little bit, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And then it cuts, and then she goes into her monologue about basically dumping all of them and shooting
Yeah.
herself. And I was like, not that I'm not one to scream out loud in a movie, but I was just like, yes, like it was like, it was such, and it all happens like so fast. And so like
Yeah.
your emotions are on this kind of like roller coaster with her. And so once again, just speaking to the progressive part of this movie, the ending is just you're like, oh wow, it was a perfect way to end the story, I thought.
It really was, which goes into what makes her so strong, right? Like she's figuring out herself, not under anyone else's terms. And yeah, it doesn't take her long to realize like, F that guy. Like Jamie's really not good for me. And I want to also touch on like when she goes back to him, she's like, I'm going to be celibate for a while, which this whole time he's claiming that like what he views as being promiscuous is the problem. Well, when she's like, I'm going to think about this and be celibate for a while, he's like, hell no. And he's super outraged by that. Even when she goes back to him, it's on her own terms, right? So I think including that makes her monologue more believable and in line with her character. Like when she went back to him, it was on her terms. And when she dumped all the guys, and that was also on her own terms. She's so strong. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Not that this is like the most quotable movie, especially after coming off our last movie of Clueless, but
I love Clueless.
Were there any quotes that stood out to you with this movie?
I was thinking about this a lot. I kind of feel like Spike Lee gave himself the best lines or the most memorable lines. So as far as like quick snippets, I love his story about run, Jessie, run. He told him to run for president, and so he's been running. Run, Jessie, run. I thought that was really funny. But also, I thought it was really funny when Jamie was like, you're a beautiful woman, Opal. I never would have thought you were gay. Like, I thought that was really funny too.
Definitely, like you said, Spike Lee kind of gives himself a lot of his own material to run with, but just when he's begging Nola not to dump him, and I feel like I had heard this before, but just please, baby, please, baby, please, baby, baby, please,
You know, Nolan, you done me wrong. Please, baby, please, baby, please, baby, 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 please.
He's famously a huge basketball fan and a big New York Knicks fan, and so I do like when I do like when he throws out the insult of "What do you know? You're a Celtics fan." I just love that because if you're an NBA fan, that's a pretty big dig. So,
I love it. And touching on the basketball, I want to bring up when Jamie is talking to the camera and Mars shows up, and they're at odds until they start talking about basketball. And then like they don't even care about Nola. They're just like talking about the game. Like it started out as a dig at Nola and turned into like Mars still got to enjoy the game, right? Like he's still totally into it. And then when the only thing that breaks off their game talk is a woman walking by and they both rubberneck at her. And then it's like, oh yeah, Nola. Like basketball is such a huge part to them, and whether it's someone like Mars or someone like Jamie, it is unifying to these two men in this movie.
I also had written down Nola's quote just at the end. We were talking about the end scene, but it's really about control, my body, my mind. Who is going to own it, them or me? I'm not a one-man woman, bottom line. Anyway, and just and just and then how she just slips into her own bed by herself. Actually, with it being such a it's a sexual movie, but so a lot of times when we've seen her in bed is with another partner. So the way that it ends with her just being comfortable with herself and sleeping by herself, I thought was pretty powerful.
Yeah, even when she masturbates, it's in connection to Jamie. So when that scene first started, I thought like, oh, this is showing that she just loves herself too. Like she just needs herself too. But it was connected to Jamie. And yeah, you're right. Like at the very end, when she gets into bed, it's just her and her with herself. I hadn't considered that before.
We talked a lot about the Thanksgiving meal. I think that's definitely a scene that really stands out and that people will remember. Are there any other scenes that you really liked or had favorite scenes?
I love it when she's gonna get into bed with Greer and he takes forever folding his clothes.
Yes, that was a great scene.
He is not his priority because he's like so overconfident, like, yeah, she'll wait. Like, my clothes are kind of more important to me in this moment. And so she's kind of like, okay. And then gradually, like, oh, like, oh my gosh, it was really funny. Like, because you think he's done. Like, okay, he folded the shirt, but he's not done. He keeps folding the shirt and admiring his handiwork. And again, about seeing like the still life photography really creates such beautiful scenes. And I thought that, you know, so far you see strangers in the movie in these photographs, but when after Jamie has broken up with Nola and she calls him and he's so angry, all of a sudden he's in those still photographs riding on the train and getting out of the train. So that in itself is an interesting scene that I really admired the craft of. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the funniest for sure is him folding his shirt.
Yeah, that was so funny when that happened. And I also noted, I think when Jamie takes her out on the date and the black and white switches to color and they watch the two dancers on stage, it was kind of funny. Just, I mean, it's pretty jarring, you know, when it switches like that and you're like, oh my gosh. But that's when also you could very much tell it was from the, like, this movie is from the 80s. There's a sense when you watch it, and honestly, I think sort of Nola's style is probably kind of like come back in some way. So the movie kind of feels timeless a little bit in the way that it's filmed. But yeah, when it does jump to color, it's a little bit like, oh yeah, this is an 80s movie. But
and what you said about people kind of coming to that style, like I thought of Wes Anderson's Grand Budapest Hotel while I was watching this. Like, I think people who are Anderson film fans kind of made a big deal about, oh, it's, you know, this part of the film is shot in this ratio, but this part of the film isn't, and this part is in black and white. And being like, wow, this is so novel. Whereas Spike Lee's like kind of doing that already. That happened a lot in this film where he changes ratios, and like you said, the scene is all of a sudden in color. And I loved how over the top it was. Like, it shows like Jamie is got a lot, like he's very extreme. Yeah, that was a cool scene. And at first I was like, this is cheesy. But as the song and the dance continued, I really got lost in the dance and kind of almost forgot, like, oh, they're watching them as a date. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rom-com rankings.
These will be a little bit because this movie is so much more unique than something like, you know, 10 Things I Hate About You, or, you know, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days or something like that. So the first category I had was the romantic chemistry between the leads. So I think this is kind of hard because I don't think it's almost like the romance chemistry is trying to act a different way with this movie. You know, it's like actually the downward slope is actually getting you to the ending of this movie versus the upward slope. But kind of a little hard to rank. But one heart being lowest, 5 hearts being the highest. What would you rank it?
As a rom-com, like in that category, it doesn't make sense to me. When this was included on the list, I was like, really? and even after watching it, I don't think of it as a romantic comedy, but it does fit, right? It's like, I don't know. So like having it to be in that category, I would rank it low as far as rom-com qualities go. But as a film, I would rank it really high, right? So you're right. Like it's almost like this film begins by sabotaging the chemical romance between these people. So it has to rank low as a rom-com. It's not like the triumph of love. It's the triumph of Nola.
Yeah.
Whereas like 10 Things I Hate About You and Clueless, like I will always go back to those. I love them so much. So, or like Bridget Jones' Diary, like, yeah. So film ranking, awesome. Rom-com ranking, which heart was the lowest? The 5?
Yeah. So no, 5 was the highest. 1
Oh,
was the
okay. So
lowest.
definitely a 1. It's a weird, it doesn't celebrate romance. Other rom-coms do.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, especially I think where we end up seeing, especially with Jamie, where his intentions lie, I think it lowers that. But
Rom-coms don't contain sexual assault unless it's someone stopping it from happening. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So the second category I had was the best friend, which is also doesn't play a whole lot with this, but I guess it would be Opal. But
Or her old roommate. It's hard to
yeah,
tell.
yeah,
Pretty
but
distant from both of them.
yeah, and I gave it 2 hearts because there's not anything like super memorable. Opal almost exists just to kind of give a new element to Nola, and that's it a little bit,
and they're not helpful, right? In most rom-coms, if there's a best friend, they're incredibly helpful. Their mission is like to see the main character succeed, and yeah, she doesn't have help from anybody at all.
Yeah. But these next 3 categories, I'm actually a little high on. The soundtrack.
So good. Like the music when I woke up, that song was in my head this morning. The theme that plays throughout, so beautiful.
Yeah, it was a little hard to kind of seek out a little bit, but I think I found it on YouTube. The score of this, which was composed by his dad, who's in the movie, and so it is beautiful. And listening to it after the movie, I was a little surprised by like how memorable it was and the cadence of it and kind of the jazz-like quality of it. And I'm not even someone who's necessarily like a jazz person, but I thought with just how memorable the score was, but also the element of having his dad do the music, I thought was awesome. And also I think it's his sister that's in this movie for a little bit. But with those two combined, just the personal but also just it's actually really beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. I gave it 5 hearts.
Yeah, and it's also there are some musics in there, like when Mars is like, I'm an African dancer. But other than that, it's the theme is the song that plays over and over through the movie. And it works. You start to not notice it because the music is Nola, right? That's her theme. I love it.
Yeah. So what do you get on the scale? 1 to 5?
Oh yeah. 5.
Okay.
For sure.
Awesome. So 4th category I have is a chase scene or declaration of love. Once again, this movie is kind of a little bit different in the way, but I think the declaration of love, and sorry, I'm cutting you off here a little bit, but is the end scene that we talked about is Nola's like realization to herself. So I gave it 5 hearts because I think, as corny as it is, and you hear it all the time, is like, take care of yourself before you take care of others. But I think you can't truly love somebody else until you love yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I thought the declaration of love was when she goes back to Jamie. Like it's her last ditch effort to get him back, right? And it's sad. Like you don't want her to do that. So if that's the declaration of love, then I'd put it on a 3 because
Mhm.
you don't want that to happen.
Right.
But if her monologue at the end of like, I love myself, I would give that a 5. I'd put that in the Frozen category where the ultimate relationship is about the sisters, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I think that's very on brand right now because when I listen to the radio, most of the songs by women artists are about like, it's me. I just need me. And then most of the ones I'm hearing from the male artists are like, please, baby, please, baby, please.
Yeah. Uh, so this is officially maybe the first time that She's Gotta Have It has been compared to Frozen. I just want to make that note. Rewatchability. What do you give this? 1 heart to being lowest, 5 being the highest.
I would love to rewatch this because there's so much within it. Just so many things to notice and admire, like the cinematography and also like diving into the characters more. But as far as being able to sit down and eat my popcorn and be like, I love this movie, rewatchability is 1. But as far as like, I want to watch this again sometime, it's 5. So rom-com category 1. I don't like watching people be assaulted. In a rom-com, it's just not for me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I ultimately gave it 4. I think because the definitely the elements that you're talking about, and it would lend itself to being probably quote unquote more of an artsy film than some others would. So it honest black and white cinematography turns off a lot of people for whatever reason also and stuff. But I think especially if you're a Spike Lee fan and a fan of independent cinema, for sure. Like, and I've always loved movies about relationships and just people talking. This is very like people talking movie, and so I've always really enjoyed those. And so yeah, that's where I lied. But these rom-com rankings is I don't think is a reflection of the overall film, because I think I really liked this film. I was kind of surprised by how much I enjoyed it when I was watching it, as far as just like standard of film, and it completely makes sense why it would be considered a high film by the Library of Congress. Like it completely makes sense.
Recommendations.
Well, I've been reading a lot. If we're talking about movies, there's this book called Plain Bad Heroines. I don't remember the author. I really liked it a lot. It's about 3 women involved in making a movie about a true supernatural event. It's really good and kind of suspenseful, and the conclusion is really interesting. I just finished this book called Thistlefoot, which I was expecting to be really cheesy, like, oh, I'll just read this, like, because it'll be easy to read and silly. But it was really good. It's kind of about Baba Yaga, which, are you familiar with Baba Yaga?
No.
Comes from Russia. She's a folk tale and lives in a house that has chicken legs that can walk around, which is why I was like, oh, if this is a retelling of Baba Yaga, it'll be pretty cheesy. But it was really beautiful. It was surprisingly beautiful. I loved it.
I did see the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and as someone who didn't even see Volume 2 or have seen all the MCU films, overall I thought it was an entertaining movie. I was surprised. I was surprised by it, but
I just remembered because I'm so tired these days, I forget a lot. I watched Thor: Love and Thunder. I loved it. It was great.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, like I haven't even seen that one yet.
I didn't expect to like it. I thought it would be really dumb and just another like, let's capitalize on the Avengers. But it was great. It was really fun.
My hearty recommendation, if you like stand-up comedy, is John Mulaney's new special on Netflix called Baby J. And I've always really liked his humor. Now, I will say, if you've never heard his stuff before, I would suggest catching his other stuff first, because this one is specifically about his basically being an addict with drugs and alcohol. And so it's a little bit about his recovery time in going into rehab and stuff like that. So it's definitely darker in tone and stories and stuff like that. But and it's still very funny because like most good stand-up comedians, they can make light of dark situations. And so, but I think maybe check out his other specials to get some context before this one, so it almost felt like this stand-up special was more for the like fans, so to speak. But anyway, as always, he's very, very funny. So next week, grab your jukebox, because we will be talking about the 1989 Cameron Crowe hit Say Anything. It actually falls smack down in the middle of the list at number 25. So it's
what a movie.
It's been a long time since I've seen it. And I've always been a big fan of Cameron Crowe. So I'm excited about revisiting it, because like a lot of people, they probably remember the scene with Cusack in the driveway holding the boombox above his head, but probably not much more than that. So I think it'll be a fun one to talk about.
I gave her my heart. She gave me a pen.
Everybody can relate to that. Well, as always, check out moviesyourlife.com for episode reviews and more. If you love this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, because this really helps us with finding new listeners. Do it right now. It'll only take a second. That would help a lot. Thanks again to everybody for listening. And Jessie, thanks again for joining me and having this conversation.
I'm so glad to be here. I really am. Even without my usual amounts of coffee when I'm really grumpy, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to do this with you.
I'm pretty proud of ourselves. I feel like if people know us, like our energy right now at this like time in the morning, I think we've done really, really well.
We have. I'm not caffeinated, and stayed up too late last night. Good for us. We're awesome.
Yeah,
we're amazing.
We're killing it.